Hi, everyone. Welcome again. Thank you. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Janie Filoteo, as Renee said, Filoteo. I am a professor of sociology and one of the facilitators for the DEI certification um, experience program here at LSC-Tomball. Today, I have the privilege of introducing our speaker, Dr. Paul Ketchum. Dr. Paul Ketchum is an assistant professor of criminal justice for the OU Extended Campus. Before teaching for the College of Professional and Continuing Studies, Dr. Ketchum was with the University of Oklahoma Department of Sociology. Dr. Ketchum received his PhD in sociology from Texas A&M University. His research focuses on racial attitudes and the impact of race on the juvenile and criminal justice systems. His work on race and the juvenile justice system has led him to testifying as an expert witness for the U.S. Commission for Civil Rights on the school to prison pipeline. His research with Dr. Mitch Peck on minority overrepresentation in the Oklahoma juvenile justice system has been recognized as groundbreaking. Their study finds the overrepresentation of minority youth in the Oklahoma juvenile justice system is wholly attributable to systemic racism. He and Dr. Peck have a book coming out this winter on this study. Before pursuing his doctorate, Dr. Ketchum taught middle school and high school in inner city Los Angeles and worked with incarcerated juveniles and juveniles in residential treatment in Texas. This experience has led to a 5-year program where Dr. Ketchum and other OU professors have created a bridge program at a Title I area school. The program is designed to short circuit the systemic racism, which ignores the fact that there is no difference in academic talent at Title I and wealthy suburban high schools. His work has shown that 1 to 2 years of quality intervention results in acceptance rates to OU just slightly lower than the local suburban schools and a 100% retention rate to the current grade, which is significantly higher than the OU overall retention rate. He and his co-authors are currently working on a book describing the systemic racism and the successful interventions for offsetting racial differences in college experience. His work with area Title I students has been recognized by the OKC, NAACP, and other civil rights organizations. The program is being expanded to a second high school this fall, with others expected in the coming years. On a personal note, one thing that I know I have in common with Dr. Ketchum is that his commitment to the most marginalized in our society extends to the safe havening of many animals over the years, which of course makes me feel better about being a foster failure, though he has me beat. Dr. Ketchum lives in rural Oklahoma, which is a redundant term. That's his terminology, not mine, so nobody from Oklahoma be upset with me. He has 9 dogs, 3 cats, and many others who stop by regularly, including quarter horses, minis, and a miniature donkey that is positive he's a dog. One final reminder for anyone who may just be joining us, please submit any questions that you have in the Q&A, or you can message the panelists. We will get through as many questions as possible at the end. Thank you, Dr. Ketchum, for bringing your unique perspective of teacher, researcher, and professor for today's presentation. What is critical race theory anyway? Please take it away.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the introduction. For those that don't know, Janie and I did our PhDs together. I think she still holds many grudges against me for things that I must have done, but she is truly one of my heroes. And if you have not heard the tales of Janie's mom, I urge you to Facebook friend her and start hearing about her wacky tales of her mom, who we have all learned to adore, even though I've never met her in person. All right, I am going to go to share screen. He says, in theory. Please work, please work, please work. Woohoo! All right. My background also, I taught at a community college for quite a while. I was a full-time professor at, instructor is what we called it, at Blinn College for 8 years, I believe. And my late mother actually worked for your community college system. She was a professor at one of your schools. me move on here. This is the plan of action. I won't promise it will work as it's written here because I have never seen a rabbit hole that I didn't like, which is probably also why Jamie is trying to keep the questions till the end so that I get through everything. We'll deal with what is critical race theory, why we use critical race theory. I want to talk a little bit about the Oklahoma and Texas anti-criminal race, critical race theory laws on teaching, and then leave as much time as possible for questions. I will, if we don't get to everybody's questions, I'll give everybody a way to contact me, and I'm happy to talk to you about anything that we don't get a chance to cover because of time limits today. Just get hold of me. Always happy to talk. I love the sound of my own voice. So, you know, whatever you need, happy to. I know you're recording this. If you need a copy of my slides for any reason, just email me. You're welcome to them. My email is really easy, and you can find me at OU's website. That's pketchum@ou.edu. All right. So, what is racism? I want to start with what it isn't. It's not just a problem caused by a few bigots. Racism is something much larger than that. We are really minimizing the definition of racism if we look for just overt discrimination as evidence of racism. And this is important because if we are to pursue equality, if we are to combat racism, we have to know how racism actually operates. Do that in reverse. Cool, I found a reverse. This is just straight demographics, and I just put this up here for just kind of a quick primer on how this all works. Race is not biological. Now I'm talking to an educated group here, and everybody knows that already. We look at phenotype expressed characteristics and we categorize based on that, but we don't do it based on whether we have connected earlobes or not, or whether we have a long torso or short legs or whatever other physical characteristic we could have. And because of that, there's just no difference in abilities and talents of people. So if race doesn't matter, we would expect, we've got 13.4% of Americans are Black. We would expect 13.4% of attorneys to be Black, 13.4% of prisoners, 13.4% of CEOs, 13.4% of janitors, 13.4% of teachers, 13.4% of professors, 13.4% of A students, 13.4% of failing students, 13.4%, 13.4%, 13.4%. And the bigger that number gets, the closer we get to that actual 13.4%. Now, that's very simplistic for the group I have here, but we'll come back because what is happening with CRT will reflect off of this basic knowledge. We have to have the starting point. Okay, so CRT, critical race theory, examines racial inequality from a social systems or an institutional perspective instead of the individual. If racism is limited to overt racism, then group issues, affirmative action type issues, they aren't really racism and therefore possibly unworthy of intervention. If we see a pattern of differential success, of differential involvement, if we see that non-white groups, Blacks, Latinx, Native American, are experiencing different levels of success in what we'll euphemistically call the good things in life, and overrepresentation in the bad things in life, then we have a problem. We have something where race matters when it shouldn't. There is some outside force at play here. Critical race theory is about looking at these outside forces that cause this over or underrepresentation in aspects of society. Sorry, going through my notes by hand. I'm on injured reserve here, so flipping pages is a little slower than it would normally be. So we look at, let's take some examples here. The criminal justice system, which is one of the areas that I work in, education system, another area where I work in, housing market, insurance, healthcare, etc. All of these things have laws, rules, procedures, regulations, etc., which change the outcome to some degree based on race. When we're looking at it from the system's perspective, from this institutional perspective, we see that these different ways of doing what we're doing will impact some racial ethnic groups differently than others. All right. I'm going to actually come back to this number here in just a second, but I want to talk about a couple different things here in how we use critical race theory and why we use it. My major area of research when I have a book coming out is on disproportionate minority contact. We call it DMC because we like abbreviations. In my research, we find that non-white youth, I'm going to just group in that category. First off, because they're treated differentially because they are not white. And secondly, because as a group, we see a pattern here, but we'll also break it down. Minorities are 2 to 3 times as likely to be arrested, yet there's no difference in the rate of criminality. We can show backwards and forwards that Black kids, white kids, Native American kids, Latinx kids, Asian kids all commit crimes at pretty much the same rate. And the type of crime, the severity of crime is pretty close. In fact, for years, we've looked at it as if we've presumed incorrectly that minority youth are more criminalistic. They aren't. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't such things as gangs or really bad neighborhoods with high crime rates. But what it turns out is, by every measure that we've found, 0.02 to 8%. Different people have measured it a little bit differently, but that's the range. That small group within any group are the ones that commit most violent crimes in this country. So what we've done is we've taken criminality, taken a small group of high crime rate individuals and painted that as the backdrop for entire ethnic or racial groups. These people are more criminalistic when we're really talking about a small group within any group. And that number is also consistent with whites, by the way. Another area, death penalty. Since 1976, 295 Black defendants were executed for killing white victims, while only 21 white defendants were executed for killing Black victims. We see this disproportionality. Now, there are a bunch of numbers in the death penalty, but they're all consistently show a racial bias without getting into great detail. Traffic stops, that's what I've got up here, but there's also dozens and dozens of other smaller studies. And they all show consistently that Black drivers are much more likely to be pulled over, much more likely to be searched, and less likely to actually have any contraband. Big national studies find that. All kinds of small city, medium city, large city ones required by the city, ones that police departments have done. All of them find the same thing. Almost all of them find a difference at night also, where if you can't tell the skin color, the racial or ethnicity of a driver, but that one's tougher because the people seem to use other cues besides just seeing the skin tone. But consistently, Black drivers are pulled over more often and more likely to be searched and less likely to actually have any contraband. And it happens everywhere. So we see this pattern here. In K through 12 education, Black, Latinx, and Native American kids are much less likely to be placed in honors courses. They're less likely to be encouraged to attend college, and if they're encouraged to attend college, they're encouraged to apply at lower ranked schools when you control for GPA and ACT/SAT exams. We just view this. Native American, Latinx, and Black kids are also much more likely to be guided towards a voc tech program than their white counterparts, again, controlling for those numbers, GPA and ACT or SAT. So we see this differential treatment based on their race, ethnicity. And this is why we look at critical race theory. We use this framework to understand it. This is just a couple of quick slides here. USA Today poll, recent one, 2021. 4 in 10 parents support restrictions on the school ability to teach critical race theory. That's a big chunk. I mean, it's less than half, but that's still a big chunk. More than 60% of American parents want their kids to learn about the ongoing effects of slavery and racism. So most American parents acknowledge that race is a problem. They want their kids to learn about these ongoing issues. But just half of the parents support teaching critical race theory in schools. And that's ironic, given that that's what critical race theory's main premise is that racism continues to permeate society. Continues to permeate society. The biggest problem with critical race theory is most people don't seem to understand what it is, and it's been painted in kind of a weird broad strokes as this very dangerous thing that's out there trying to control the minds of America, and it simply isn't. It is literally just a framework that we use to understand how racism works. Organizing with a hand and a half here. All right. Do we teach critical race theory in high schools? I am one of those unique characters who teaches graduate classes, undergraduate classes, and I teach concurrent enrollment on site in a Title I school. We talked about it a little bit in my research, but I've been teaching for what's actually now 8 years in a Title I school, teaching college classes, but also actually dual credit. So I actually teach high school credit classes with concurrent enrollment. Some kids don't qualify for concurrent enrollment. So I'm in that really weird category, one of the few people that teaches actively in the same semester high school students, undergraduate students, and graduate students. Do we teach critical race theory in high schools? Oh God, no. I use it for a framework and a lot of stuff. Don't get me wrong. It is how I understand racism best, and when I'm teaching about racism, that is the framework that I'm going to rely on the most. But I mean, from a theoretical perspective, I do more than a lot of people in the high school level, and we're talking kind of basic theoretical stuff here. We don't teach critical race theory in high school. I don't know of anybody who does. I will give an example. I made it to the press. I made it to the Christian Science Monitor one time a few years back, where they interviewed me about a teacher in a local high school at Norman High School who had been teaching from a critical race theory perspective. I don't know the teacher at all. He was clearly in a graduate program, probably at OU, but again, I don't know who he was at all. And some student did one of those, videotape from under the desk what he was talking about, and her parents were livid. And the community was, for about 15 minutes, in an uproar. The superintendent supported him 100%. Before the superintendent could even support him 100%, teachers and students were out picketing on his behalf. So he didn't get any trouble, but I I didn't even know about this. I got a call from a reporter. Explained, you have to tell me what's going on because I don't know. One of my comments was, if it was suggested that he may have told students that if they were white, they should feel guilty for being white. And it is not clear to me that I actually ever said that. That was an accusation. But I said, if he said that, that would be kind of a rookie mistake. And I would have counseled him not to frame it that way, because that's just not going to reach the same. But even if he did say that, again, rookie mistake, but not worthy of firing or anything like that. He's still working at the time. He's still working his way through it. As far as I know, he's still teaching there and quite successful. Do we teach critical race theory to undergrads in college? Teach at a college? Oh God, no. Again, there are a number of you. Janie knows critical race theory as well or better than I do, and you probably have dozens and dozens of people there that much of their work is framed in critical race theory. You've got people in your college system that know this stuff backwards and forwards. So among other things, seek them out when you need more information. But we don't teach it to undergrads. We don't even do it to upper division undergrads. Janie and I did our PhDs together. I never took a class in critical race theory. I have a PhD. My primary area is race ethnicity. My advisor was one of the big dogs of race ethnicity, past president of the American Sociological Association, the most cited race theorist. I don't know that he ever even used the term critical race theory once. Am I a critical race theorist? Yeah, I fit in that category. But I fit in that category because that's the research that we use that is the most up-to-date research on understanding how race ethnicity works. But law schools apparently may teach it, but even as sociologists, we just don't have a class in it. Again, it's just a framework. It's kind of the equivalent of asking, do we teach Keynesian economics to undergrads? Not really. We may teach some aspects, or you might have an econ class that does. I don't know. But or Malthusian economics. Do we teach about that? No, we typically don't. That might be a framework for something that you teach, some way that you understand an aspect of economics, but that's not the same thing as, is this what we teach our college students? Does critical race theory blame white at the individual level for racism? There's a really long and complex answer here, which I have on the screen. Nope. I mean, I'll expand, but that's kind of it right there. In fact, it's kind of the opposite, to be honest. We're looking at systems level issues. Let's take policing for an example. We know that despite, I talked about this earlier, and I've got all kinds of data. If you are really interested in it, just get hold of me. I've got a book coming out. But police departments arrest minorities at a higher rate than they do whites, controlling for doing the same amount of crime. Why do they do this? Well, in some cases, it's because some officers are racist. But could you very possibly have a completely non-racist police department and still have that minority overrepresentation from policing? Yes, absolutely. Minorities tend to live in denser population areas. Denser population areas tend to have more police viewing you when you're in public. Denser population areas, and especially poor densely populated areas, excuse me, have less private space. When I was a teenager, like every other teenager, at least I like to think like every other teenager, I did more than my share of stupid. In fact, I was actually pretty good at stupid. But a lot of the stupid that I did, we were able to do in relatively private spaces, away from, police patrolling our large backyards or whatever, wherever we were. So you could conceivably very easily have a completely a police department made up of racially progressive officers across the board, and still see this overrepresentation of minorities in the justice system, an unfair overrepresentation. Critical race theory, rather than just looking at overt racism, because you've got no overt racists in this scenario. Critical race theory still allows us to understand the issue going on. So in many ways, it's the opposite of us looking to blame whites at the individual level for racism. What we do is we know that law is often neither apolitical or neutral. Look as simply as the famous example of crack cows, apparently, is what I was going to say. There's something very Oklahoman in that. Crack cocaine versus powdered cocaine. Crack cocaine is literally, well, I don't want to say watered down. It's divided up cocaine. But the punishment for crack cocaine was much, much higher than for powdered cocaine, despite it being less potent technically. Everybody thinks it was more potent, and it wasn't. So we had different punishments for that. We treated one group as very different, and it was largely purchased based on racial groups, what was sold in certain areas. So you have this classic example of laws that were very political, and they were clearly not neutral. We don't always look at stuff objectively. We have whatever the cause of is the day, or the fear of the day, and we make laws that are frequently not fair, not objective, to address those. All right. What are these really about? Many of you have probably read this somewhere back in your days, in Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack by Peggy McIntosh, this idea of white privilege. More recently, we have, a couple years back, White Fragility came out, D'Angelo's work, and that caused a whole new uproar, although it's essentially very similar to the previous concept. We repackaged a little bit, we refine how we're talking about it. And we see, if any of you ever go on to TikTok, actually it's better if you don't. I'm not saying you shouldn't go on TikTok, but ask this question of your students first. Go ask your students if the phrase, "Hey colonizer," has any meaning to them, and if so, what that meaning is. I don't know this gentleman at all. I have seen him on TikTok. I've seen him on TikTok because my students all know his work. He's a grad student. He's Navajo, so I'm assuming he's a grad student in Mexico is my guess, but I don't know anything beyond that. I just know that he mentions he's starting his second year of grad school. I don't even know what it's in. But he talks about Native American, about racism, and how it impacts Native Americans. Most of the stuff is pretty good, pretty on track. It's pretty simplistic. I mean, it's TikTok. They're limited to a few minutes. Sometimes he screws up badly, and he's really good about being corrected by others and accepting his mistakes and stuff like that. And he's not the equal of D'Angelo or these others, but the kids, oh my God, I sound old. The students out there know work like this, and they're hearing about this, and they're seeing this inequality and learning to understand more about it, because this stuff is factual. There are people out there screaming crazy stuff on the right and the left, but as far as I can tell, most of his stuff is pretty accurate. Um, these critical race theory battles going on in many red states, they're really battles over how narrowly racism can be defined. Um, we don't want, if we're going to deal with racism, we don't want to keep in this very narrow definition so that we can't address it. The critical race theory laws consistently, and I've looked at a number of them. The Oklahoma one, by the way, is really easy to read because it's literally a page long. I am not making that up. It's a one-page law. It's not written in crayon, but it's sorry. But it's trying to narrowly define, and we'll get to these in just a second, but it's trying to make racism this very specific thing, this very specific objective thing that is only overt racism. I'm not racist. You have to prove it. You have to catch me in the act of actually being racist. It doesn't allow for patterns that show racial differences that were likely put into place on purpose. So I'm going to read real quickly about the attacks. I'm going to use a friend of Janie's and mine, David Embrick. And I'm going to do it if I can find my notes, the one set of notes I really needed. Organizational skills are not my strong suit. Okay, I'm just going to page behind here. Got it. All right. Just need a second working hand here. All right. I'm slightly editing what he has to say here, but the attack on critical race theory is not new, but has certainly taken on a life of its own in recent months. While arguments within and outside academia abound with ideas of how best to understand critical race theory, the reality is that the attack on this over 40-year-old concept is not only an attack on critical race theory itself, but is also a facade for rendering silent both the deep legacies of racism in the United States and attempts at better understanding how systemic racism continues to affect Blacks and other minoritized groups in our society. Saying we are a post-racial society does not make it true, and ignoring the ugly truths about our history of racial and ethnic oppression does not mean those histories are not part of the fabric of the United States. Teaching about the history of racism allows us better insights into understanding modern phenomena such as housing and neighborhood segregation, the racial wealth gap, institutional racism, and disproportionate minority contact, for example. Critical race theory challenges the ridiculous notion that discussing racism will only fuel racism, or that it is divisive and anti-patriotic, or that it's an unfair attack on white people. In many instances, diversity ideology and the ambiguity of similar language only serve to undermine real attempts at getting to the truth about the past and existing inequalities in our society. This is an old battle. For those who don't want equality, and Janie and others feel quite comfortable in disagreeing with me on this, but the way I see that is that those who are fighting discussions about racism see equality as a zero-sum game. That to have equality, they have to give up some of their benefits. I don't see anything to support that, by the way. That doesn't make any sense to me. And that's not a data-driven conclusion, but that seems to be what this perspective is coming from. We don't want to give up the benefits of being white because then we don't have as many benefits. I honestly don't see what we lose. I just don't. What I do see is we probably have a bigger, stronger economy. I look at the Title I students in the Oklahoma City area, and I know that OU, which is the flagship university in Oklahoma, feel free to make your own joke, is skimming the top 1, sometimes 2% of the urban Title I students to recruit into OU. We just simply don't go after that many kids, even though, well, the Norman High School right next to OU, high schools are actually, they have 2 major ones. We take easily from the top 35, 45% of each senior class there. And I don't know that we're losing any Norman kids to bring more in from the city, but we sure as heck, we're missing a whole bunch of kids in the top 10, 20, 25%. We're never seeing them because we don't develop their abilities and we don't recruit them into the good colleges. This isn't unique to OU. University of Houston, I will guarantee, runs into this issue. Texas A&M, University of Texas, all of these schools were missing a lot of really talented kids simply because we aren't out there getting them prepped for college. And by the way, that part's really easy. Somebody who's been doing this for years, it's not that hard. It doesn't even take that much money. We just simply don't bother doing it. All right. How will this is our Oklahoma version and your Texas version impact teaching and academic freedom? All right, I'm going to premise this with I am not a lawyer, so do not take this as legal advice. But I do want to say I've got a good friend who's the lead attorney for Oklahoma City NAACP, and she and I talk about this quite a bit and other things. And I'll get to kind of her recommendations here in a minute, but I made sure that everything I was looking at, I was not, seen from some crazy sociologist perspective. The Oklahoma bill, by the way, had one really different point. This very first part here, prohibiting certain students within certain institutions from being required to engage in certain training, aside from being just the worst legalese I've read in a long time. This is about a program that OU was supposed to start this fall. We were requiring all students attending OU to take a mandatory diversity course. And they were bringing in big guns too. I was mentioning my friend David Embrick from University of Connecticut. He was actually a finalist to run that program. We're still doing the program, but it got hamstrung by this. We cannot require it. OU has a history of racial problems, as anybody who's ever watched the news knows. We keep having fraternities and sororities doing really stupid stuff. We keep doing stupid stuff on campus. It just keeps happening. And so this was OU's very honest attempt to try to minimize that, to try to make the university safer for minorities. And the timing was literally just like a month before we started. They cut the knees out from under this program, and that was clearly on purpose. We're not allowed to orientation or requirement that presents any form of certain stereotyping or bias. This is going to get weird in a second. Prohibit employees of certain schools from requiring certain concepts to be part of a course. Not quite sure where they're going with that, but I'll get to that in a minute. Oklahoma for higher ed. Now that was for the high school end. Higher ed, no, that was actually the overview. No student, institution higher ed, blah, 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 required to engage in any form of mandatory gender or sexual diversity training or counseling. Voluntary counseling shall not be prohibited. So we can't make students learn about diversity anymore in Oklahoma. We're not allowed to. But we can't force students to take classes or go to certain training or whatever about equality. K through 12, we're not allowed to teach that any individual is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive. this goes back to this belief that critical race theory is about teaching people that whites are bad. I'm a critical race person. I'm white. I really don't hate myself. It's not accurate. This is where I think it's going to go sideways for this, for the Oklahoma bill, and the Texas bill has the same clause in it. One race or sex is inherently superior to another race or sex. My prediction, and my attorney friend with NAACP has the same prediction. This is going to hit them not the way they expect. If we go back to, or if we have anybody still teaching this kind of old school version of, say, history, where slavery, where the Civil War wasn't about slavery, or that slavery was, good, or that people, certain groups are not as successful economically, career-wise as others because they are inherently not as qualified or not as good. Much like the original discrimination laws were first used by whites, I kind of suspect this law may be used by minorities if they're being taught that inequality is their fault, is because their racial or ethnic group is not successful. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. If I really was, that good and that accurate, I would be at Harvard, not at OU. But this looks like a real plausibility. It's just one of those, this is a reaction law that is about not what's supposed to be the best for teaching or the best for students or anything like that. This is about playing the populism card right now. It's drumming up the culture wars. These all go on, but all of them have kind of strange things. By the way, G falls in the same category. Any individual should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological distress on account of his or her race or sex. Holy crap, does that open it up for minorities to use this law? Explain to me why blacks are incarcerated at a higher rate. Well, because they're more criminalistic. Research doesn't show that, though. Well, that's what we've got to work with. Holy crap, there's a lawsuit under this law right there. It just doesn't do what they think it's going to do. It's problematic, don't get me wrong. It's not this wonderful weapon for progressive or anything like that, but I suspect it's going to bite them. Meritocracy or traits such as hard work ethic are racist or sexist. This goes right into that. So what we have to do is, despite all evidence, we have to pretend that we have a meritocracy. If we are saying that we have a meritocracy and that any group that is not successful is because they just didn't have what it takes. If we see a pattern of Latinx or Native American or blacks who are not as successful, and we say that that is a meritocracy, we have just said that they should feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other, and some form of psychological distress. I don't want to overplay this card, but it seems to be a poorly written law that has a lot of big holes in it. Your Texas law is a little more detailed, but it runs about the same. Tennessee has a law. I have a friend who's in the state Senate at Tennessee, and he contacts me about this stuff a lot for my read on it, and their law is pretty similar as well. All of these anti-critical race theory laws are running kind of the same stuff. By the way, none of them mention critical race theory, even though everybody talks about them as critical race theory. It's kind of the thing. It caught me by surprise. I was teaching. I just left a class at Crooked Oak, and what turned out to be retired teachers from Crooked Oak came by, and they like to hang out at the school with the athletes or something. I don't know. And we got to talking, and they said, "You're not one of those critical race theorists, are you?" And I said, "Well, yes, as a matter of fact, I am." This is before this really got big. And I explained what we were doing at Crooked Oak and how successful we were, and they were like, Oh, okay, that works. Not 10 minutes later, I stopped at a friend of mine. Um, he has a radiator shop and he does work on, I got to him because he works on my tractor and stuff. And one of his customers came up and introduced himself. We're just all talking, and I told him what that I taught, and I'd been just down at Crooked Oak. Because you're not one of those critical race theorists, are you? This is twice in 20 minutes. Again, I explained what I did and how I did it and what the results were. And he's like, oh wait, that's kind of cool. So there's a lot of misinformation out there. If you are wondering what do you do, as many of us are, my first advice, and this is also NAAC attorney's advice, make sure your institution has your back. If your institution doesn't want you doing anything to do with race, then you better make a decision whether you want to work there or not. And they may be doing it maliciously, or they may be doing it just out of the overabundance of caution. Some of the community colleges up here near where I live did that. We had one that famously made the national news where they canceled a race class because of fears of this. And my lawyer, and again, go find an expert down there, go talk to local NAACP, get advice. But OU has come out specifically, and I don't blindly believe that everything OU says they're going to do, but I believe this, and it's important. OU has made it very clear that if for any reason any of us get in any hot water from this, that they have our back 100%. This is integral to teaching. We need to be able to teach where the facts take us. We can't make up stuff and teach that. Well, I guess you couldn't create a writing, but in the other areas you can't. Theater, my mother's area. But for the rest of us, we can't do that. And to do that, we would lose the value of the institution. So OU has our back, says you do what you're doing. You don't worry about it. If anything goes sideways, we got you. And I believe they honestly do in this case. I don't know anything about your community college district. I don't know what their take is on it. Hopefully they are supporting you fully like OU is supporting us. And if they are, then do your thing. Go out there and teach it like you always have been. Support your stuff. Make sure you've got stuff documented, but you should be doing that anyway. We, as social scientists, especially where this matters in humanities, we have to speak truth. We have to teach where the evidence takes us to. And if the evidence changes, then we have to reevaluate our conclusions. That's just basic good teaching. So go do your good teaching. Questions? I tried to leave plenty of time for questions here. I'm hoping I did a good job.
I do have a question, and it is first, thank you for, the screen is moving on me, so give me 1 second here. First, thank you for giving up your time to attempt to help us understand. You made a comment about white people thinking they should have to give up something if they were to work towards ending racism. There are also Black people, and I'm guessing people of other races, who are against CRT. For example, Carol Swain, who wrote Black Eye for America. I haven't read it, but only have heard about it. If CRT is supposed to help get rid of racism, why do you think there are minorities against it?
There are multiple questions in there. I want to get to all of those. I'm really wishing I had a way to see this. Let me check and see if I can see this here. I cannot see the question.
I'm gonna send it to you if I can in a chat.
Okay.
We'll work on that as you start.
Yeah, because I'm hoping to be able to answer your question fully, and I don't want to answer something that you weren't asking. Or if you, oh, there we go. First, thank you for giving up your time. Oh, seriously, are you kidding? This is what I do. I study this stuff. I am so happy and honored that you guys allowed me to take up your time. You guys are the ones giving up time. You came here to listen on this topic, and I'm truly honored that you think what I have to say is worth your time. Comment about white people thinking they should have to give up something or they would work towards ending racism. That's not, and forgive me if I stated this way, I don't think that that's universal. I think that there are those who are opposing things like critical race theory that believe that. I don't think that that's everybody. I think the only thing that makes sense to me in opposing critical race theory, if you're white, is that you think it's a zero-sum game. I don't think it's a zero-sum game, and I know many other whites who do not. But I hope that clarifies what I was saying there. Now, there are black people, and I'm guessing people of other races against CRT. Yeah, absolutely. We're always going to find people like that. And the exceptions are important. But the exception doesn't also prove the rule. Why they would do that, if there's a group of people doing that, yeah, there's probably a sociological answer to that. It may be an individual psychological answer too. They may see the world as differently. They may just genuinely see that, see a world where, we'll use blacks as an example from your example there. You may have a black person who thinks that blacks really need to try harder. I mean, that's okay. Do the facts support that? No. So in this case, they'd just be wrong. People are wrong all the time. If you don't believe me, I would like to steer you towards the comment section on the internet. Doesn't matter where you go, just look. Join Facebook. And people get to be wrong, especially people who are victims. I'm not going to go out there and say, hey, what is wrong with you? You're black and you don't seem to understand critical race theory. But opinions on what causes racism don't get us anywhere. And that's the purpose of critical race theory. We have to go with where the evidence takes us, where the research takes us. And the research shows that systemic racism is alive and well. The research shows that there are groups of whites that fight back against any attempt to create more equality. We have a long history of that. I mean, the election of Ronald Reagan is an example of that. For history folks out there, we see all that pushback in 1980 to all of the movement towards equality from the 70s. So I think that minorities who are against fighting racism are mistaken. I don't think the evidence supports that. Although it is conceivable, we've seen minorities who monetize fighting against their own racial or ethnic group. So in that case, maybe it's logical at the individual level for them. But I think there are a whole bunch of different possible answers to that. Do you have a broad stroke introductory statement that can best describe the theory and pique someone's curiosity? Not off the top of my head. Janie, you got anything?
So I'm gonna piggyback on that and see if you've got something for this, because this was gonna be my follow-up question. Because I think that they're kind of in line. Is what is your best pitch for the response to you mentioned in your talk, right, the thing that we all hear. Well, if we would just stop talking about racism, then the racism would go away. Like, what's your best pitch for the basic, you're not a student, right? I'm going to give you this quick elevator pitch as to, I don't want to be confrontational and be why you wrong, but why you wrong.
I can't think of an example of any scenario where ignoring a problem makes it go away. I would like to ignore it when my bank account doesn't have enough money. It doesn't seem to matter. I still don't have much money. I would like to ignore my wife when she's cranky with me, but if I do that, I'm looking for a much bigger fight. And my wife is a forensic entomologist, so she knows how to make a body disappear. So this would have larger, ramifications for me. I just am not aware of any scenario where ignoring a problem makes it go away. And that becomes especially important with critical race theory, because we can pretend that there is no racism if we don't say it out loud. If we don't have the overt racist, we can pretend that there is no racism. But the problem is, all of the data, all of our experiences even, keep showing differential treatment of minorities as compared to whites. And for that reason, because if you look at what I earlier referred to as the euphemistic good things in society versus the euphemistic bad things in society, if you look at that, you see an overrepresentation of minorities in the bad stuff in society and an underrepresentation of whites in the bad stuff. It's not that you can't be white and have bad stuff happen to you. You can, absolutely. But we're talking about odds here. And this is what CRT is talking about. We're talking about this group level stuff. So we're talking about seeing this more often. An exception doesn't prove the rule. That is not a quick elevator speech, or that was a really tall building. And I don't have a good one, but I don't know that I've ever had a good one. What my go-to is to explain how my research makes a difference in certain areas. My disproportionate minority contact, I honestly, Mitch and I, my co-author, we honestly thought that 20 to 30% of disproportionate minority contact in the juvenile justice system was going to be due to minorities committing crimes at a higher rate. Turns out I'm an idiot. This is where we need that clown picture of me. I submitted a clown picture to Janie. She wouldn't use it. I had to get dressed up for a clown for something my wife was doing with her students. She would not use it. But I screwed it up. And I tell people this because the data took me elsewhere. I really assumed, because of all these social forces at play, that non-white youth, that Black youth, that Native American youth, that Latinx youth had a good reason. I mean, they've got these things, they're treated differently by society. They have fewer good options. They're oppressed in so many ways. I thought, well, yeah, I can see where that would, some of that would leak out into higher rates of criminality. It doesn't. And critical race theory is how I examine this. Critical race theory is how I know I was wrong. And other data supports what our conclusion. This isn't us alone finding this. So you have to look at the systems for it. And when we're really doing it well, we're looking at multiple systems interweaving and how that works. I don't know if that even, let's talk more about title school you teach at? Sure. Why and how do you think CRT got wrapped up into this? Became part of recent. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Renee.
No, go ahead. I was going to say we have a couple in the chat.
Okay, yeah, I'm getting some. Janie's popping some up here for me.
Okay, cool.
She's doing her great cut and paste.
Okay, cool.
Why? How do you think CRT got wrapped up into this and became the target of recent Oklahoma and Texas legislation? Culture wars, which is overly broad and somewhat meaningless just by itself. In Texas, unlike Oklahoma, in Texas you have a growing liberal portion of the state. But I think what we have is a GOP that I don't recognize from the GOP I grew up with. I'm a Democrat. I'm clearly pretty liberal. But I have a lot of friends that are Republicans, always have. I grew up in the horse world. So many of the people I know are conservative. What we have now is populism. Much of the Republican Party is being taken over by populism. I'm not completely out of my element here, by the way. I have a master's in political science, so I'm not the expert other people are, but I'm not speaking completely out of my field here. So we're moving into, if you can't win, if you're losing the votes, find something that grabs people. CRT does that. There are a number of people on the right, and clearly not all, but there are a number of people on the right who are scared or can be made scared of minorities. We've seen this happen time and time again. Heck, we've seen the Democrats do it. So this is one of those things where you get people to ignore what's going on around you, and you make a cause. One of the old dead white sociologists, and I'm going to paraphrase, basically said, for there to be an us, you have to have a them. You have to make a them. So this is making a them. Using CRT, it's always described as some kind of crazy thing that's anti-American and anti-white, and it just isn't. It's about equality, but it scares people if you say we're against them. These crazy liberal professors are against white people and trying to brainwash our kids into something else. By the way, you guys are all at community college. Are we really that good at brainwashing kids? Really? and as faculty, I would love to see you get a group of faculty to agree on anything just once. I've been to enough faculty meetings. It does not happen. There's no way we're working in concert to try to pass critical race theory onto people, because we can't even figure out what classes we want to count for what. It doesn't happen. We can't figure out office space, for God's sake. So, you know, I don't, it's about getting people to join you and support you. It's about just throwing something outlandish out there. Please talk more about title school you teach at. Can you give specific examples that work for these students academically? Yes, and also give me a phone call and let's sit and chat, whoever you are. Be ready to write down my number. I'm going to give it to anybody who wants it right now. 979 area code 587-0610. By the way, it would be the most hilarious joke if you all just started calling me at once right now. I would laugh. That would be the greatest gag ever. But again, it's 979-587-0610. Yes, I have my old A&M phone number still. I teach at a small Title I school in Southeast Oklahoma City. It's an independent school district, small one. We have the big Oklahoma City public schools. I'm starting to work with some of the Oklahoma public schools right now. But the one I've been working with is Crooked Oak. It's Crooked Oak Public Schools, Crooked Oak High School. When I was doing research for disproportionate minority contact, we did self-report, anonymous self-reports surveys with students from urban, rural, suburban schools, the Oklahoma City metro area. And that was one of the schools we did surveys at. I was just thanking the superintendent. And, you know, I did mention earlier, I spent the better part of a decade teaching in South Central Los Angeles, high school and middle school. And like a couple of old horses are wont to do, we did one of those, you know, if they would just let me, this is how I would fix things. And we looked at each other and we're like, hey, wait a second, you're the superintendent. And he's like, and you're a college professor. We can do this. So we started doing it. And it's been, first off, the time of my life. We started out with getting, and I'll give you a couple of different measurements. Most of our measurement is to OU. We started out with the first senior class, 8% were accepted to OU. Last year we were at 34%. And that's over really 5 years. There are a couple of years before that we worked with community college. We had to kind of twist things around. We had to fix some stuff that was working, not working. So what the big difference is, it's not just concurrent enrollment. We take in all comers. Any kid who wants to be in the class is allowed to be in the class. I teach social problems every fall religiously. We also usually teach biology. We've had history in there. We've had a few different people doing it, and it's been just amazingly successful from the start. What we do differently is first and foremost, nobody working with us is allowed to ever treat the kids like they're doing them a favor. You don't get to say, hey, you guys are so lucky to have me. I'm this big dog professor. Be grateful that I'm here for you. And I learned that the hard way when I was teaching high school in Watts. I had a student call me out on that. Why are you acting like you're doing us a favor by being here? Which really stopped me in my tracks. And it's one of those moments that, led me to being a sociologist. But we just don't allow that because they are deserving of it. Mostly Title I schools, this district tries their heart out. They just don't have the money. They don't have the tax base, so they do everything they can to help the students, but they still don't have, the quality of teachers they'd like to get. They lose teachers to other school districts. Most really talented teachers like to go to a suburban school where it's easier or closer to their home or whatever the case is. So we just, we don't give them the best options. What we do also is we focus on teaching them the skills that they need rather than teaching the course. We use the course material as a means to teach them the skills that they need to have to be successful in college. And our success rate is 100%. So it's working. It might not have, so I'm just really grateful that we've got that 100%. And we don't have a big end or anything like that, but we've got, more than 50 kids over there right now. And it's been working pretty consistent, and they're all staying in. And they're all graduating when they get there and everything else. And most of them have more than one major. All of them from day one are expected to go on to grad school. They may or may not, but they now think of college as being their first step. And they rock and roll. What I found, this was courtesy of my wife, one of the things that made the biggest difference was taking them over to OU and sitting in on actual classes. Because until then, they're having trouble seeing themselves as belonging. And now we do that every year. In fact, we're taking this group over there in 2 weeks. We're having trouble with buses, so it's probably going to be us borrowing some school Suburbans and me and another professor driving them over there for the day. And they'll meet with librarians who love to work with them. And they'll come to OU with better library research skills than any incoming freshman. They'll realize that this is a place where they belong. We stay connected with them all the way through. We have a volunteer group of students that works with them, tutors in math and ACT and other stuff. I have a volunteer TA who is wonderful, except when she quite loudly in front of the entire class points out to everybody that I'm the only person who was alive in the 1900s in the room. You can find her body somewhere. So, I mean, that's kind of the short version of the stuff we're doing. I love talking about it. Please contact me and we'll talk. And I would love if you guys anybody down there was interested in setting up something similar down there, and I can be of any help. I will give you access to everything we have. Just say the word and I'm all in.
I think this is going to be the question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Renee, go ahead. I was going to say this is
older
probably the one we have to last.
Yeah, we have some of the older chats that were out earlier.
Okay.
I went to the last question.
Oh, that's okay.
Sorry, what did I miss? You go ahead, Renee.
Oh, yeah, that's fine. So one question goes back. There's a couple of comments. There's 3 of them in the chat. One is, though, are these state laws legal? The ones that you mentioned, and can they be challenged in court?
Yes, they can be challenged in court. Are they legal? They are until they're challenged in court. According to my lawyer friend, they're just waiting for somebody to challenge them. We have to have a case to challenge it. I know all of the regional, state level NAACPs are waiting for a case. And I know there are other organizations that are waiting for a case to challenge it. I've only heard of two incidents, I think both were in Tennessee, where they've actually acted upon these laws in any way, shape, or form. They haven't done anything in Oklahoma. Nobody's been approached. I am considered high risk for being a target of it. But again, I honestly don't think I'll ever be a target of it. I just don't. Now, I may go into Crooked Oak tomorrow and realize somebody took a picture, a screenshot of my whiteboard and reported me or something, but I just doubt it. I hope I'm not wrong. I don't think we're going to see a lot of actual legal action on this. And in some ways that benefits those who wrote the law, because this is about intimidation. It's about stopping the conversations or limiting the conversations on racial equality. And if we don't get a chance to challenge it in court, you know, the longer it takes to do that, the more they can put the kibosh on it. So I just, you know, will it be challenged? Yes. Will it get shot down? I'd be stunned if it didn't. One never knows where the Supreme Court is going these days, but it should under freedom of speech. If you're teaching the truth, if your stuff is backed up factually, how in the heck can they tell you can't teach about that? I mean, just, it doesn't make sense. It boggles the mind that they would think so. And I honestly don't think that was the intent. I don't think they ever thought it would stop teaching critical race theory. I think they thought it would put the brakes on it a bit. And that's the best case scenario they could hope for. That's my take.
There's another question. Do you think critical race theory is so controversial because it is based in storytelling and there is fear attached with who is telling the story, how the stories will be perceived, and if the story is fully accurate?
Short answer, no. I mean, kind of, sort of. Okay, I'm done. Next question. No. Because critical race theory isn't limited to, you seem to be referring to more qualitative research. And I'm very much a qualitative researcher, but most of my work is mixed methodology. I just happen to have a good friend who is a hotshot with stats, and I've basically forgotten all of my stats because I have somebody to do it. But much of my research, for example, we have mixed methodology in our book coming out. We have interviews with 156 police officers, lawyers, judges, and probation officers who work with youth in our area. 1.5 to 2 hour interviews. We have to code those and so forth. That's very much qualitative research. But we also have all kinds of quantitative data. We have self-report surveys. We have police reports and court records that are very much quantitative data. So it's not limited to qualitative data in any way, shape, or form. I am not necessarily in the mainstream of sociology when I say I like mixed methodology in most cases best, because I think the numbers answer a lot of the broad pictures for us, and the qualitative gives us some of the more nuanced understandings. But again, you know, the CRT is very much a part of supported by quantitative data. I don't have your question in front of me, or do I?
It's in the chat.
It is. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
I'm looking for the one. How does it start?
Do you think CRT is so controversial? 3:58 p.m. because it is based in storytelling and there's fear attached.
Renee, I think that was sent to you.
Oh, you can't
for
see it?
some reason, I am not able to see that, so I apologize, because it's hard for me to answer your question fully based on my memory, because I am very goldfish-like.
Okay, I just dropped it to you. Sorry, I actually dropped 2 comments. There you go.
Got it. Okay, do you think stereotyping is so controversial because it's based on storytelling? Sure says. I think you're absolutely right on the fear, though. How the stories will be received and if the story is fully accurate. There to what you're saying, because there is a big part of this. I mean, for how many decades has the Black community been telling us police are using violence on us at this incredibly high rate? And police officers are like, no, we aren't. The police department saying, no, we never did that. And with the advent of easily used video cameras in our phones and everything else, Rodney King on down the line to today, we've seen a lot of cases of this. We have seen so many of these stories that were denied for so long, and we still see them denied even when there's video evidence. And there are some that we see that turn out that there was a reason for it. We didn't see everything. But again, the pattern is still one of more violence towards Black drivers from police than in the same situation for white drivers or white pedestrians. And there are numerous examples of this. And there are some quantitative studies that have looked at this and just counted it out. So we know that that's happening. It's not the best reported, but from what we can see, there is clearly an overrepresentation and differential treatment based on race by police. We didn't want to believe those stories for the longest time. You still have people believing it. You still, Blue Lives Matter based on that concept. When Black Lives Matter appeared, Blue Lives Matter was the group intended to minimize that by suggesting that there is no difference, even though the numbers say they're different. I think if we see the stories enough, it becomes overwhelming. We've seen the tide turn on even things as the percentage of Americans who acknowledge and believe in what Black Lives Matter is saying went from a minority to a distinct majority. The more we kept seeing these stories, it's a shame we had to keep seeing them. And there are other stories we aren't seeing, especially with like Native American women. Oklahoma has much larger Native American populations, so Native American issues come up on our radar screen much more often. But again, Native American women are being treated at this horrendous rate, disappearing, being beaten, all kinds of stuff. And we don't hear that much about it. We need to hear about these things. You run the risk of people becoming desensitized to it, and I understand, but I think these stories need to get out, and we need to see them as often as possible. Fully accurate. Okay. Which one do you want me to hit next?
This is the last one. It was a comment, actually.
Good minoritized populations. Is that the one?
Yeah, it was in response to the earlier question about people that there are Black people that are proponents of critical race theory.
Minorities populations opposed to critical race theory and other critical theories be a way to support their own meritocracy. Example, I got hired, so can you. I got the degree, so can you. How did I become a police chief if the system is racist? Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that becomes one of those individual. You hit kind of the main point there of why we see this. I think that's very perceptive. We look at. We know from a number of studies that when we as individuals are successful at something, it's because we are wonderful. The famous surveys of, are you a better than average driver? And it turns out most people are better than average. I do qualitative, so maybe I need to go talk to Mitch. But I think that's tough. So we tend to think that we did it on our own merits, and I think that's what happens with whites when we're talking about whites not acknowledging white privilege. When so many years ago McIntosh was pointing out to us, hey, this invisible knapsack, these are the things that you don't have to be concerned with when you're white. You don't have to worry about people on TV looking like you. You don't have to worry about Band-Aids. matching the color of your skin. Little things, big things, and everything in between. I think that minorities can look at it and go, hey, I was successful, and that's got to be on me. You know, so if I can do it, clearly you guys can. I've always thought there's something weird about that kind of an argument, though, because if you're clearly proud of your success, which you should be, kudos to you for being successful, especially if you're a minority. There's no reason for pride, though, if it's common. It just doesn't make sense. If everybody could do it, everybody would be doing it, and there would be no reason to mention it. I think you innately know you've done better than most if you're talking about how you've done better than most. So it just is kind of disingenuous to say everybody else could do that. You know, I think you're dead right on all of it, though.
We just have one final, and we have 6.5 minutes. That'd be perfect. The
Cool.
Chief Justice Roberts, good one. To end
Okay.
on. He always gives us good
Yeah, I
questions.
saw this one pop up earlier. Chief Roberts famously ended his opinion in the parents involved in community schools with the statement, "The way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is stop discriminating on the basis of race." How would you attempt to correct this thinking on this, and where do you believe the fundamental misunderstanding creeps in their political and legal thinking? Your governor just defended a essential total abortion ban by saying we're going to stop rapists. Okay. It's missing the point of the problem. Roberts, I mean, it stuns me that I can describe him this way, is kind of moderate for the current Supreme Court, because Roberts is not moderate by any stretch of the imagination, but he's pretty moderate on this court. He's basically making the argument that these anti-CRT laws make. If we ignore it, it'll go away. We need to stop discrimination. Cool. What are you doing to stop it, Justice Roberts? You know, you know, I'd like to see I'd like to see there be no more rape, so let's stop raping. Well, yeah, that's great, but how are we going to do that? You're not offering a solution for the problem. You're basically saying, let's pretend it doesn't exist. And I suspect that was the point of the person who made this. It's just, if we deny the existence of inequality, that's not a way to fight inequality, be it racial, ethnic, gender, sexual orientation, religious, whatever it is. If we deny the facts that say this is unequal treatment based on this characteristic, you're not doing anything to fight it. You're helping support it. So in this case, Roberts is not helping fighting discrimination. He's helping the continuation of discrimination. But I suspect he knows that very well. I have no doubt that was kind of a snide comment on his part to maintain the status quo.
All right, I think that's it. You already gave everyone your phone number.
I did.
And you gave everyone your email.
And I'll share the slides with everyone, if that's okay with you.
Oh, yeah.
So thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us. Thank you, Dr. Ketchum, for your insights today. And I think that's it.
Cool. I've been kicked out of better places.
Have a good one.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Nice seeing you, Dr. Ketchum.
It was truly my